tell you firsthand that speaking with a variety of different healthcare leaders from around the world, one of the fundamental components that still is hard to tackle is data governance. Because once you autonomize the ability to develop these agents who interact with each other, who's monitoring the implementation of those? Who's tracking the value and the ROI and the time spent in developing these? Are they doing what they intended to do? It's here, it's leverageable, but containing it is actually a very big strategy to have to incorporate within your organization.
NXP Semiconductor's intelligent healthcare system solutions empower customers to navigate complexity, accelerate development, and unlock innovation. Together, we create next-generation healthcare solutions that enhance patient experiences and enable better healthcare outcomes. Learn more at nxp.com/healthcare. Hi, my name is Junko Yoshida. I'm the editor-in-chief of Junko's Tech Probe on Substack and the host of Junko's Talk to Us podcast series. Now, our guest today is Ben Goldberg. He's a global industry lead, health and life sciences at CGI. CGI is a global IT and business consulting service firm. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Junko. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And today I'm with Ron Wilson, technology editor and co-host of this special video podcast series we're running under the theme of Toy to Tools in search of domain-specific AI. Hi, Ron.
Hello.
All right. So as you can guess, because we've got Ben with us today, we are going to dig deeper into the use of AI in healthcare and medical science. But I'd like to actually frame these things first because I have to confess, us reporters, when we discuss AI in the medical field, we often talk about the use of AI in the context of accelerating the drug discovery or AI reading X-ray films much better than radiologists, that sort of superficial understanding. But I think Ben can actually walk us through what it takes to get to the efficient AI application to the medical field. All right. And one of the things actually Ben and Ron and I were talking before recording started was that really the apply AI in every domain effectively prerequisite is the foundation data. So, Ben, without further ado, walk us through that. What is really the foundation of using AI effectively in medical field? And then we go into the details in terms of the actual applications.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, and you nailed it right on the head. There's foundational components that you need to have in place before you're layering any of this technology onto it. And a major piece of that is data. It has been for some time, it continues to be moving forward. The quality of that data, the completeness of that data, the sources of that data, I think, is also a valuable piece too. So you're not just narrowing the data set that you're leveraging to make decisions. So it really is about that informed decision making. That's really crucial on that. Specifically within healthcare, you have fundamental issues within the industry that are unique, where you talk about interoperability issues. So fundamentally, you can have one provider who uses a certain data standard in the way that they capture their data versus another, and those two systems not talking to each other. And therefore, you have data quality issues, you have completeness issues in terms of pulling that and marrying that data to get a full view of the patient record.
Yeah. All right. So I think of this, the digitization of medical information or medical data has been happening for a long time, right? Where are we today? Because
It
that needs to
has.
happen, yeah. In
Yeah, no, for sure. It's actually it's the stuff that I used to do before I joined CGI. So my background is in healthcare mostly. I worked within the public sector here in Ontario and across Canada for that matter as well. And it was about a lot of the experience I had was about implementing an electronic health record within Ontario. And so the work around that I focused on were laboratory results. It was around populating registries. It was around diagnostic imaging as well, sourcing that data and having a complete view that then you can tap into. So this was stuff I was doing 15 years ago, and this is stuff that's still going on today. And it's a big initiative. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that we still have initiatives within Canada that are called Axe the Fax. So we have physicians who communicate between instances via fax machine, and it's still very much reality. So there still is a big effort in digitization. With
Wow.
that being said, we are miles ahead of where we had been before. Depending on the jurisdiction, some are in super modernized instances as well, where they've achieved much of that digitization, and it's about maintaining that. It's about mapping all these data pieces together to help introduce emerging technologies such as AI.
I've
Oh,
heard in some other areas where people have tried to merge disparate data sets, just identifying an individual uniquely so that you know that this person's blood pressure and this person's cardiogram and this person's chest scan all go with the same person.
Yeah.
Is that a problem we're beginning to solve, or is that still a big impediment?
No, it is. It is. And I mean, it's about how that data was captured in the first place and trying to trace it back. And the older the data, the less accurate it may be sometimes. The mechanisms that were in place to capture that data fundamentally have changed, and if there's consistency. And let's take an example of an individual who, maybe lived in New Jersey and then moved to Philadelphia, and then after that moved over to London, England, and then returned. There's gaps that are going to be in that history as well, and trying to map that individual back sometimes has not been very effective. And there's then these different sources of those data that reside in multiple places too. There's this pie in the sky hope that we can have an international patient summary one day. There's initiatives that go towards that as well. But for the time being, it almost begs the question about who owns that data and who should own that data too, right? If that's maybe an opportunity for a patient to have their data and, where I go, I bring it with me. That could be a
yeah,
scenario
yeah,
that is talked about too.
yeah. That's really important. All right, I'm going to dive into some of the AI applications we seem to already have in some places. And one of the things I really loved, and I should have known, was AI Scribe. And tell us about that, Ben.
Yeah, AI Scribe I find fascinating. I find it fascinating because it's the most consequential of the AI instances in healthcare that I'm seeing right now. So, concept of AI Scribe is, well, the first concept of it was to capture the communication that happens between a physician and their patient. So, imagine the encounter that you have with your clinician when you go in for a checkup, or maybe you do have some sort of health issue that you'd like to have addressed. You sit down with your physician. 9 times out of 10, they're on the computer typing away, trying to capture the notes as they're engaging with you. But it's broken. That communication is broken, and that patient-clinician relationship is jeopardized because of that too. On top of that, the amount of hours that are then spent after your patient visit, where the physician then has to what's referred to as pajama time, where they're into late hours reviewing those notes that they've captured and then doing what needs to be done. So I met with Ben. Ben's blood pressure's through the roof. We're going to get him prescribed this medication and then to send the prescription off, all the different elements of what happens after the encounter. What AI Scribe does is it's turned on in the background, captures the entire encounter, knows who's speaking, summarizes that interaction, and provides a nice, quick patient summary of what's gone on throughout that encounter, which again, the physician verifies, makes sure that the data that's captured in there is valid, and then that gets added to the patient's record. The evolution of the AI scribe then includes, okay, well, there's a way that the AI can also interpret what it's just captured. So it said Ben now has a prescription for blood pressure medication. I'm going to send that off to the pharmacy to get that prescription filled for him as well. So there is just a variety of different opportunities that pull from it. But the statistics on how impactful that is, I've got a few with me here. There's groups within the US where they've seen 86% of their clinicians reporting less burnout, 83% highlighting improved job satisfaction. There's 16,000 documentation hours that were saved within 15 months. I mean, these are massive, tangible impacts that these solutions are really having. And these are the things that the health community is really desperate for.
Just out of curiosity, do you build a Scribe application like that by just putting a layer on top of a generic generative AI like ChatGPT, or do you have to add additional training, or does it take an entirely different kind of model?
Yeah, those large language models are very much trained. So it is, I mean, not that they don't exist, they do exist. They're medically trained large language models, but that's an imperative for it as well. So there is Dr. Google out there where you can introduce a lot of these, and quite frankly, it's got that content, but not to the level of accuracy and not with the nuances that are associated with healthcare. So there's a variety of off-the-shelf applications that are on the market right now that physicians are introducing into their practices. Also, some of the big hyperscalers like your Microsofts of the world have introduced their own platforms as well, like the DAX Copilot that's in existence. So they're very tangible. They're very much on the market, which is just excellent to see that there's competition and drive in terms of introducing it.
And how widespread is it now, as
So
far as you know?
yeah, it's gaining traction. And again, I think it really is because the proof point from it is so demonstrated, right? So it's so immediate. Um,
Yeah.
from a personal perspective, I can tell you we've got 3 daughters at home, and our daughters have a pediatrician. We're fortunate to have one, and she's fantastic, and she's been practicing for many years. And I won't age her because she's fantastic regardless, but she's been practicing for many years. And her practice just introduced an AI scribe, and she is beside herself, so excited about its usage, and instantly understands how to leverage it as well. And it has fundamentally saved her hours. And I can tell the difference when we interact with her, when we bring our daughters
Oh,
in, what that engagement looks like with that kind of a solution, just playing in the background, doing what it needs to do. So it's phenomenal in terms of that.
all right. But then I think what you just explained when you explained the AI scribe, what it can do after the doctor meets the patients, and there's a patient care that continues after the meeting, right? Whether it's to order the prescription drugs or whatnot. So tell me about that, how that component actually connect to AI scribe.
Yeah, I think that the concept really being that you've got these AI agents that independently function really well. But
Yeah.
in this new evolution of true agentic AI, you have a network of these that can interact with each other. And that model just starts to spell out such opportunity. So now it's about a multitude of different processes and engagements that can be automated and have AI leveraged in their deployment that can then speak to each other and become this, like I said, a whole network of these agents working together. It's a crawl before you walk kind of scenario here too, though, right? Because you're starting to tiptoe into not just an automation of a process, but also the introduction of some clinical decision making that would be happening from an AI perspective. And that's where you really want to, that's where as an industry, I think we're treading lightly, because we don't want to be introducing something where you're shirking that responsibility to an automation engine.
You mentioned connections. From a systems analyst point of view, are these point-to-point connections that are unique to each pair of applications? Or is there some sort of an underlying network that can communicate between AI applications?
I think it varies. It depends on the scenario. From what I've seen, I don't think that there's anything unique that needs to be developed above and beyond. These systems obviously need to talk. Usually what you're doing is you're building these networks within a platform ecosystem. So you're not introducing too many that have to interact with each other, but many of them sit on top of the broader applications too and can function independently. So the scenarios are evolving, right? These use cases are being developed as we speak. So a lot of that is being tackled.
Interesting. So is there actually, I think there's a lot of possibilities, and I would like you to rattle off some of the projects or experiments or trials or actually commercial deployment that AI has seeped into the healthcare.
You
Yeah, I
bet.
think you have a global view of this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, one of the first ones that I was privy to is some work that we did within chatbots. This was some work that we did with the British Columbia Ministry of Health, so here in Canada. We had our foot in the door because of some support that we have done. I mean, the ministry being a client of ours for quite some time, but also some support that we did within within COVID times. And so we alleviated the burden of a kind of like a 1-800 number that people would call up to seek information about COVID and what was happening from a vaccination perspective and such by introducing a chatbot. I think we had like 1 million engagements within the first 30 days of that chatbot. So it really alleviated a lot of burden. And that was
Wow.
just purely from a chatbot perspective. And that chatbot has evolved. It's actually such a smart platform that the physician community also leverages it too. And that was a big thing within COVID. It was tapping into its own chatbot for physicians to learn where we were in terms of vaccinations, what the latest was on PPE, all of those good things. But the next evolution of it was to really broaden the way that it interacts with the public. And one really strong interaction was was within cancer care. So BC Cancer now has a chatbot of ours that leverages AI, and an individual can interact with a chatbot to engage about their own cancer journey and treatment and support. And if and when necessary, a nurse can step in to interact through that same platform. But it was a step in that direction, which immediately alleviates a lot of that back and forth that may need to happen with administrative staff, where they can focus on caregiving and other more priority tasks. Um, that technology we also leveraged in what we call our digital triplet. And the digital triplet is a concept where you take what's a digital twin, which is fundamentally a digital iteration of something physical. And that something physical can be an individual, it could be a building, it could be a data set. But you layer on a triplet, which is the AI layer on top of the digital twin, and now you can interrogate that data. So you have this mass amount of data that says, this is Ben Goldberg. I can now query to find out information about the individual. I can query about our public health system with that data that's fundamentally in there from the digital twin. I can find out where there's, again, from a vaccination perspective, where are some of the target areas within the country that we have yet to deploy vaccines at the rate that we're expecting? What's ambulatory wait time looking like in a certain region? All of these pieces of information that can be captured on the fly. And that's proven to be really influential and instrumental in a lot of the work that's being done within the region. So those are maybe some of the more administrative operational efficiency data kind of sources. In terms of predictive health, we've got some incredible work that we've done in Finland around brain hemorrhaging. And we have this platform called AI head analysis, which has been trained on imaging data to be able to predictively forecast brain hemorrhaging at a much earlier stage. And so this is a massive opportunity to be able to introduce preventative health measures to fundamentally save people's lives, which has really been phenomenal. And then maybe one more I'll throw at you as well, some work through England. So recently we went through an acquisition of an organization called BJSS, and they came with just such a significant footprint in health and life sciences. It's been incredible getting to know them and getting to see what they do. And one piece that they did with a group is this IVF embryo selection. So the concept being with a company called Care Fertility, they've trained over 500 million images and 2 million events to help reduce time to insight and improve reproducibility by being able to select embryos at a much more earlier stage when it comes to IVF. So it's fascinating to see these applications, and it's almost like the world's your oyster because there's so many of these that are still yet to be introduced, but you can see that tangible benefit to the patient on the front end.
Wow. But again, each of these, the Finland example you gave me,
Yeah.
they must have a really good data in terms of what I mean the historical data or the global
Yeah.
data. I mean, how did that work? I mean, in that
Yeah,
case.
it's regional data, and that's something that does technically, it tends to exist within the region too. Finland and some of these smaller Nordic nations are really great test vessels for this too, just because of the size of the population that you're dealing with. So sometimes it's easier to market. I'm not saying by any means it was an easy initiative, but the
Yeah.
fact that it could happen, I think sometimes as a result of that. You look at some of the work that we do in Estonia, and not necessarily from a healthcare perspective, but in terms of digitization. Estonia is, I think, one of the leading, if not the leading countries in terms of digitizing
Yeah.
fundamentally every encounter that you have within the
Right.
government. And it's fascinating to see what you can do. And again, it's a population of, I believe, 1.3 million people. So, it's a drop in the bucket compared to other regions, but it's still such a good proof point that other jurisdictions can learn from.
Interesting. All right. I don't want to be a person who spouts doom and gloom of AI, but I do worry. Are there any instances in healthcare that the use of AI is not exactly recommended?
The doom and gloom with AI is always fun. I actually, just on a side note, I read a book called The Coming Wave. It's by Mustafa Suleyman. It's a very interesting book. I think both of you would actually really enjoy it. But
Okay.
the the doom and gloom within that book, it makes you take pause for a second as well. You got to get to the end of the book though, because there's a bright, shining light at the end. But
Oh, good.
nonetheless, I would say that what's important when you're introducing any of these technologies, when it comes to clinical decision making, AI in general, we always push for a human in the loop. I think that's a fundamental concept to everything that you're going to be doing. You cannot have blind trust in the technology as being the be all and end all. The case studies are happening, the use cases are proving out that there's genuinely something here that's helping to alleviate burden, increase well-being, streamline process, modernize solutions and systems, but not without a human being privy to that as well, making sure that there's validity in it, questioning some of the outcomes, verifying the sources. There's actually some fun agents that we've developed that actually ensure that your instance is staying true to AI regulations. So that's an interesting spin on it too. You can ensure that you're staying compliant by leveraging a bot that ensures you're staying compliant. So it's a little bit of a
So
cyclical
it's sort
model,
of
but something
AI
very
is
true.
watching AI kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Who's policing who though? No, but it is very important. And I think that's sort of one of the fundamental realities is that people always talk about AI coming and taking your job, and that's not the case. It's a new tool in the toolbox. It's a very effective one, and one that is doing some really transformative pieces in an agency that's ripe for disruption. But by no means is it replacing people in that respect.
You talked about human in the loop using AI. Is it also important to have humans in the loop in generating the training data set so that you don't, for instance, have a clinical history with no recorded outcome or a clinical history where the doctor was hallucinating?
Hey, no, for sure. You got us back to the beginning of the conversation, right? The
Mhm.
quality
Yeah.
of that data. And so
Yeah.
you need to have that validation that happens from the get-go. And sometimes
Mhm.
sometimes you need to get to the end to realize that you should have been doing that at the beginning, right? So you see some of those outcomes and those outputs, and they fundamentally don't make sense. And you go back and you verify within your data set, and you improve your data set, and you expand your data set as well. So it really is cyclical though. Like I don't think that that's something that ever ends. You're never necessarily going to have all the data, nor are you going to have
Right.
everything in this exquisite, perfect state. So that's a constant part of the cycle.
Sounds like it takes a wide range of skills to prepare the data.
It can. I think it's true. I think that there's pockets of these that exist though in different regions too, and there's sort of a global recognition that this is something that's very important. I think an interesting one, I was talking about this intimate roundtable I was at just the other week with the president of a global biopharma company, who spent his time with a very small group of us, which was excellent, and just to hear his perspective on some things. But it was specifically about AI and the potential for transformation within healthcare. And he comes from a life sciences biopharma perspective. But what he was saying is that a lot of the data constraints or the data limitations that they have come in clinical trials, for example. So if you don't have the most fulsome data within clinical trials, that's going to influence a lot of the molecule work that you're doing. That's going to influence the outputs in the end, where you'll find out way too late in the game that your clinical trial was flawed, or you didn't have the right data, or you didn't have the right people, or they had conditions that weren't weren't known at that stage. So that's an interesting piece that's very unique to that process as well. But it's a very interesting perspective. And even beforehand, we were talking also about some of the other industries and some of the other areas of data that globally have an effect on you as an individual and your health and well-being. We talk about socioeconomic pieces, and that might not be included naturally in a data set, but has a very big piece of the puzzle. If you're living in poverty and you're struggling in meals, but you're being addressed for, some sort of treatment for Alzheimer's, is there a connection? If the two data
Right.
pieces aren't sourced together, you're fundamentally never going to know. And that could be a massive gap in your research.
It almost sounds as if the increasing use of AI in this context could push us toward building a digital holistic image of an entire person, including their experience and their environment. And that in itself sounds like a huge thing.
It is, and those genomes that have been developed, it's pennies on the dollar to do that now. It's the whole concept, and again, it was the same roundtable where we were talking about preventative health, predictive health as being, you know, the golden star. Like that's really what we'd like to achieve, because the earlier that you're able to intercept any health issues with an individual, the better it is for the individual themselves, but the better it is for the system. If I can detect cancer at the earliest stage and address it, then I don't have somebody who's going to be reliant on the health system to the extent that they will be when it comes
Yeah.
reality. So it's really interesting to see where things could go. But you know, that's about an outcomes based model as well, which most healthcare systems aren't. They're a bit more of a fee for service model, interaction model, the way that that the billings happen. So there's there's regions that are investing much more in that preventative health. There's technology there to capture that a lot better too. But it will come. It's a matter of time.
Is that going to be a distinction between the European, Canadian style healthcare system and the American style? That one's focused on cash flow and the other on outcome?
I
You
sometimes
put him on the
sometimes
spot.
I know, right? For what it's worth, I'm not making those decisions. No, I think it's interesting. It's a holistic view. I mean, you know, even when you look at an industry like life sciences, right, which is really interesting, because life sciences, when it comes to pharmaceutical manufacturing, depend on mass amounts of data that, for all intents and purposes, they're going to have to pay for. And if they're paying for it to create something that's then going to be proprietary, the outcomes that they achieve are not ones that they're going to share. So you have these little silos of data that are happening in these major global biopharma organizations who fundamentally want all the data and don't want to share that data. And I get it, because that's the nature of the industry. It's not it's in a way there's a greater good that they're trying for, but at the same time they're investing heavily in these systems to validate data, create something unique, and distinguish themselves from their competition. That's going to be a reality for a very long time. The way that
Yeah.
health systems engage with each other. I think, you know, last time we chatted, I was talking about an initiative that just closed off in the UK where volunteers were contributing their imaging data to a massive repository, and they got to their 100,000th patient, a guy named Steve. We got to be really appreciative for Steve. But it took, I think it said 9 years. It was either 8 or 9 years for that to happen. And that's going to be what happens in a volunteer model, right? And even if you do get into a preventive care model, do I want to contribute that data about me as an individual to a broader system that may leverage it for some things that I'm not comfortable with? It's another component of data management. It's about data ownership. Who owns that data? Should I monetize that data? Do I have the right and the ability to? It's a can of worms, that's for sure.
Yeah. You know, I have a question about agentic AI. You mentioned, actually, you used the terminology agentic AI earlier in this discussion. And
Yeah.
Ron and I were talking the other day, and Ron pretty much dismissed, oh, agentic AI is pretty much a marketing thing. And now I look at some of the writings about like chip developers, right? And
Sure.
now they're talking about, well, you need different kind of a processing power to run agentic AI. So we're moving into a different different phase. But from where you sit, um because you use the term agentic AI, what's your definition of agentic AI? What does it do really?
Yeah, so agentic AI is really those individual agents that are developed to interact with other individual agents, and you get this network of agents that can all speak to each other and complete a task, leveraging each other. So each of them is trained to do a subset of that workflow, and together they help automate it completely. And I mean, it's a wild world. That is this next evolution that we're in the midst of right now, and I've seen some of the big players introduce their agentic AI models, and it's fascinating. What I think is the most fascinating about it is the autonomy that comes along with it too. So, you know, if I pick on Salesforce, for example, Salesforce have their agentic AI platform. And if you are a Salesforce user, you technically are autonomized to be able to develop these agents on your own and have them leveraged within your organization. It's a very interesting world we're getting into.
Yeah.
I can tell you firsthand that speaking with a variety of different healthcare leaders from around the world, a lot of them still have, again, back to data management, one of the fundamental components that still is hard to tackle is data governance. Because once you autonomize the ability to develop these agents who interact with each other, who's monitoring the implementation of those? Who's tracking the value and the ROI and the time spent in developing these? Are they doing what they intended to do? And even if you don't have a model where you're autonomizing, you do have a model where people have the ability to present conceptual ideas on where AI could play a role within your organization. And in that, you still need governance too. So what's the intake for that? How are you validating that it's actually time well spent? Does it fall ethically within the guardrails that you've imposed within your organization or within your jurisdiction as well? So it's here, it's leverageable, but containing it is actually a very big, I will
Ah,
say, strategy to have to incorporate within your organization.
ah.
Is that going to create a new profession in the way that cybersecurity created a profession? We'll have people who are trained and experienced at regulating the use of agents and evaluating them.
Yeah, again, I think it's an ideal model that probably does need to be in place, right? And whether it's within your organization from a governance perspective, or if it's broader within a jurisdiction from a government perspective, trying to set those guardrails is fundamental to the way that you're introducing AI in any of those spheres. So it is a role that exists right now. How defined it is, it's probably something that needs to evolve, but you do need to have that. Absolutely agreed.
Now, for someone who has been, deeply involved in applying AI to healthcare, what are the things on your wish list? Ben, you wish you had these things so that you could actually do better with the use of AI in healthcare.
For sure. I think the I don't know if there's necessarily like the dream bot that I have in my head about what it's going to be, but I look to organizations to be more open-minded. I think that's really what's in my wish list. I think first and foremost, right? It's a sector that, like I said before, is ripe for disruption, and
Yeah.
disruption in a purely positive sense. It's disruption that in the end helps the patient population. So anything that you can do within your organization to address the problem statements that exist, like my physicians are burnt out, my emergency department is congested, we do not have the number of healthcare providers to support the population and the growth of that population. When you look at those big overarching issues that happen globally, and you have the potential to introduce something that's not necessarily going to fix it completely, but it's going to alleviate the burden. It's going to streamline the processes. It's going to re-envision the way that care delivery can actually transpire. That's massive. So I would look for more open-mindedness. I would look for, I mean, you tread carefully as you get into these worlds as well too. But
Yeah.
that's really what my goal would be, is to be able to demonstrate through these successful case studies that there's opportunity, there's change that's actually coming, and it's going to help modernize the way that that the industry functions.
When it comes to the actual implementation of AI, what do you see as the biggest hurdle? I mean, you mentioned open-mindedness, but what is
Yeah,
biggest impediment of proliferating AI, the use of AI cases?
yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that CGI does every year that I love is we do our own kind of market research. So we have this process called the voice of our clients. And the voice of our clients is our opportunity to interview our client base and learn from them what they're seeing within their organization and within their industry. That helps inform us on what our strategies are and how we're going to evolve our service offerings for them. So it's a really great process. We did over 1,800 interviews with executives last year. The outcome of that was a really robust data set, again, that helped inform a lot of what's going on across industry. And within health and life sciences in particular, what I found fascinating this time around, and I think it's been true for many, is that there's two speeds of transformation. We call it the two-speed transformation. And those speeds are those that are trying to innovate, redefine the way that healthcare is being delivered, move the yardstick and fundamentally innovate, versus those that are still focused on legacy systems and modernizing their infrastructure. And the two of those happen at the same time, and it's a very difficult balancing act. I talked to some colleagues within the Canadian healthcare space, and I'll stick close to home for the moment just for this comment. But Canadian healthcare is very unique. You've got unions that define fundamentally where your spend is going for 75% of your budget, believe it or not, because that's on your workforce. That's on your nursing staff, your clinical staff, your C-level staff. That's all defined via unions, and that takes care of 70 to 75% of your spend. Then you have 25% left to deliver services, keep your patients alive, treat them the way that you need to, support your infrastructure, introduce IT, have a robust cybersecurity practice, all while you're trying to modernize legacy systems and introduce innovation. That is a hefty lift. And so when you have those two realities in your ecosystem, that two-speed transformation is really interesting. And within that, you see that there's different maturity levels, the way that folks actually handle it. So you've got some organizations who have addressed those legacy systems, can be more forward thinking, are looking to see where they can introduce modernization and innovation. And then you have those that just can't get past the legacy systems that are anchoring them down. And Junko, you had said it earlier too, you can't just throw AI on top of, old systems or antiquated machinery. You need to do that foundational modernization to be able to cascade and grow.
Yeah.
You must find client situations where you have both kinds of transformation in the same organization with different sponsors.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting to see how they navigate through it too, right? Because you've got different demands that are on them too. Within CGI, we have our trifecta. So we talk about the members, which are the staff, the 94,000 of us, and what we need from the organization. You talk about the clients, they're obviously a huge component of it too. You talk about the shareholders. I mean, any organization has influences from different angles too, right? And for hospitals and healthcare, fundamentally they have the patient population, but they also have their executive leadership, they also have government, they also have a bunch of different impacting sources for how they run their business. So it's a difficult thing to navigate, but that's where organizations like us step up to help support.
Yeah. All right. In closing, actually, I'd like to ask, I think Ron asked this question before we started the recording, is that what is the use of AI in terms of helping the process? I mean, if you think AI is a tool, then AI itself, I think in this conversation, you mentioned AI monitoring AI, right? And what are the good examples of using AI as a tool to expedite the process or accelerate the process? Talk about the process where AI could be effectively applied.
Sure. And I mean, there's a variety of processes that just help you fundamentally run your organization, right? You've got all your back-end service offerings, you've got your finance department, you've got your IT department, you've got some of the less sexy stuff that happens within an organization, but the things that fundamentally could improve by way of automation and innovation. So those I think are paramount to moving the yardstick from and even a nice way to tiptoe into the realm of AI. So it's not necessarily I got to get AI out here and I got to do something that's going to be clinically impacting that my patients are going to feel. If I've improved the way that I'm doing my billing, immediately there's going to be some good outcomes from it. I think
That's
some
true.
of one of the most interesting approaches I heard from an organization, and this was from their chief data and technology officer, was the way that they're revisiting where AI can play a role in your organization is actually at an HR level. And so you look at individuals and you look at what an HR role is defined as. So this is the criteria for what Ben does within his organizations. What aspects of that do I need the human for, or can I automate and then elevate what that level of a position actually is? So I don't need Junko to come in and do all these different pieces anymore, because these are going to be actually a component that's addressed by my new AI army. This is going to be the technology that I introduce in my organization to alleviate that burden from my workforce and let them focus on the things that you need the human brain to actually address. And so they've actually taken their HR department and they've changed it into an HDR department. It's human and digital resourcing. And I found that to be a fascinating approach that I think is not just true to on a single industry. I think that can be done across all organizations around the world.
Do you think that AI could also be used for the change management necessary for an organization to adapt to this rate of change?
Ooh, you got good questions on you, Ron. I tell you, the change management piece, I think, has a humanistic element to it that that might be beyond where automation and technology is at this point in time. There's a human component to change that is so true, regardless of the industry, that there's a white glove treatment that I don't think automation can deal with right now. There's aspects of it that it helps streamline and almost alleviates it so that you do allow the individual to help support that change management. But in every instance of introducing new technology, there is change component that's associated with it, whether it's a cultural shift, whether it's the way that things function. Everybody needs to be on board with that change, and it's not necessarily something you can lean on technology to address for you.
Seems like we talked about three fundamentally different kinds of AI here, if I was keeping track properly. We talked about chat-related things, like
Sure.
for summarizing patient visits. We talked about pattern recognition things. And you also mentioned, which was a new one on me, using AI as almost a query language into an unorganized database.
Mhm.
Did I catch those right? And are there
Yeah,
other
yeah.
fundamentally different kinds of things?
No. I think you're good. I think, the concept of ambient technology around AI scribes and clinical documentation, the concept of being able to read and evaluate and prescribe according to imaging and diagnostics, the concept around predictive risk, proactive outreach, some pieces that I didn't talk about as well, but well, I touched upon billing a little bit, but even prior authorization, administrative automation, those are big pieces of the puzzle as well. And then there's some of the more strategic concepts to it as well. But I think you nailed it, Ron. Those are definitely some of the big buckets where we're seeing tangible impacts by introducing AI.
Very good. Thanks for the summary. And we hope to catch up with you later. I mean, Ben, this was very illuminating, and we'd like to hear more. All
It was
right.
my pleasure. Thank you so much, Junko. Thank you, Ron. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. NXP Semiconductor's intelligent healthcare system solutions empower customers to navigate complexity, accelerate development, and unlock innovation. Together, we create next-generation healthcare solutions that enhance patient experiences and enable better healthcare outcomes. Learn more at nxp.com/healthcare.